So we're reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila chapter 17, that's correct. Text number 57 through to 61. So, to 64. So I'll read the verses prior to 64, which we will chant together. So this chapter is entitled The Pastimes of Lord Chaitanya in His Youth. So, dare I attempt the Bengali for all the verses before 64? Okay, let's try. Translation. You have committed an offense at the lotus feet of Srivas Thakur, the Lord said. First you must go there and beg for his mercy, and then if he gives you his blessings and you do not commit such sins again, you will be freed from these reactions. Text number 59. Well, I'll just explain. So Lord Chaitanya is speaking to Gopal Chapala. Okay. Text number 59. Translation. Then the Brahmana Gopala Chapala went to Srivas Thakur and took shelter of his lotus feet, and by Srivas Thakur's mercy, he was freed from all sinful reactions. Text number 60. Translation. Another Brahmana came to see the kirtan performance, but the door was closed and he could not enter the hall. Text number 61. He returned home with an unhappy mind, but on the next day he met Lord Chaitanya on the bank of the Ganges and spoke to him. That Brahmana was expert in talking harshly and cursing others. Thus he broke his sacred thread and declared, I shall now curse you, for your behavior has greatly aggrieved me. The Brahmana cursed the Lord, you shall be bereft of all material happiness. When the Lord heard this, he felt great jubilation within himself. Okay, so we'll chant text number 64. Translation in purple by His Divine Grace. Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One should know with firm conviction that the Lord, being transcendental, is never subject to any curse or benediction. Only ordinary living entities are subjected to curses and the punishments of Yamaraj. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is beyond such punishments and benedictions. When one understands this fact with faith and love, he personally becomes free from all curses uttered by Brahmanas or anyone else. This incident is not mentioned in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Okay, please repeat after me. Any faithful person who hears of this Brahmana's cursing, Lord Chaitanya is delivered from all Brahminical curses. Magyanatamrandasya Gyananjana Shilakaya Chakshu Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padekamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padans Agana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so the context. So there's a community of Brahmanas who feel some envy towards Lord Chaitanya and his followers. Lord Chaitanya has been engaging in nocturnal kirtans in the home of Srivas Thakur. They close the gates so that these people can't enter into these kirtans. And in the previous verse, in Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami said that as a result they burn with envy. So these individuals who could not get into these very confidential kirtans, they're burning with envy. So it's considered that the leader of the non-believers, Gopal Chapala, he decides one day to it's like he wants to frame Srivas Thakur. So he collects the paraphernalia which is meant for Durga worship, and he leaves it outside the door of Srivas Thakur. And the idea being that when people see it, everyone will see, aha, Srivas Thakur claiming to be a Vaishnava, but reality, he worships the goddess Durga. So he does this, Gopala Chapala does this. So when Srivas Thakur sees the paraphernalia, what does he do? He calls all the community, everyone come and look, see, I'm a cheat, I'm a hypocrite, look, this is proof. I claim to be a Vaishnava, but look at what I'm actually really doing. The Brahmana, the word that's used, interestingly enough, in the previous verse, gentleman. So, cultured individuals, they all understand who Srivas Thakur is. They understand his caliber. So they all understand this is nonsense. You haven't been worshipping Goddess Durga. Clearly there's someone has tried to present you in a way that's actually false to how you really are. They clear away the paraphernalia, clear the entire area with cow dung in order to purify the area. Very soon after, Gopal Chapala, as a result of his offenses, he gets leprosy. And so he actually has a conversation with Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Chaitanya says to him, because he tries to take shelter, and Lord Chaitanya says, no, you made an offense, I'm not going to give you shelter. You actually have to go and beg apologies from Srivas Thakur. And so he does so, and then he approaches the Lord again, and the Lord gives him that shelter. So it's a very, very interesting pastime. It's a very well-known pastime. And there are many different things that we can derive from the understanding of this series of events. So let's look at this. So 57 through to 64. Okay. So the Lord has told him in 57, 58, you've committed an offense to the lotus of Srivas Thakur. First you go and beg for his mercy, then if he gives you his blessings and you don't commit such sins again, you'll be freed from these reactions. It is very interesting that the instructions to the devotees are to chant the holy names of the Lord and to not offend the Vaishnavas. You can consider these two the essential points. Chant the holy name, really chant the holy name, not just having your hand in the bead bag while you're doing something else, but actually listen to that holy name. Chant attentively. And at the same time, the other side is be attentive in your relationships. That sense of being attentive in your relationships, that can be unpacked. It's like a sutra. It includes not offending Vaishnavas. But it actually is very, very powerful because the two things are interconnected. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says the root cause of all offenses is apipramadaha, which is what? Inattentive chanting. Very interesting. If you're inattentive to Krishna, you're going to also be inattentive and offensive to his devotees. If you cannot recognize who the Lord is, then you also will not be able to recognize the people who he associates with. They all, in a sense, they're all in the same category. Because Krishna never comes alone. So he is there with his devotees. And therefore, our access to Krishna is through the medium of our access to his devotees. Therefore, Sadhu Sangha, that verse is really key for that reason. In one sense, it actually comes prior to the holy name. In one sense, it is more fundamental than the holy name. Why? Because it is the sadhus who give you access to that holy name. Even in the initiation, we've been chanting the holy name before, but when it's given by the spiritual master, then you can really take shelter of that. Because it's meant to be given in parampara. The question has sometimes come up, if this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is so fundamental, why is it we never read about the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, or we never read the directly stated Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in the verses of the Bhagavad Gita? And the answer is because it is meant to be given by Guru. That holy name is meant to be given by the spiritual master. So, Lord Chaitanya said, you first go and ask him for forgiveness if he forgives you, and you do not commit the sins again. Now this is where it becomes difficult. Because it's one thing to do something wrong and ask for forgiveness, but the other thing is to deal with the habit of doing something wrong. You understand? It's not just the activity, it is the tendency that is being spoken of here. So you stop the activity and you don't do it again. Then you'll be freed from these reactions. There's a science to this. To root out not only the activity, but the tendency to commit sins, the tendency to be offensive, you actually have to go deep and understand, why do I do this? Why do I act this way? Why do I tend to behave this way and speak about the Vaishnavas in this way? It requires some introspection. In fact, to go deep in Krishna consciousness, it requires some introspection. As one becomes blessed by different levels of progressive Krishna consciousness, a different world or a different dimension of Krishna consciousness goes up. One may be a beginner in Krishna consciousness. In some sense, the beginner is engaging in devotional service in the mode of ignorance, because they don't actually understand what they're doing or why. Someone's giving you the holy name, someone's giving you a bead bag chant. Okay, you're chanting, but you don't actually know why you're chanting. It's Krishna, okay. But the tattva behind that is extraordinary. Right? You should associate with Vaishnavas. You don't really know what does that mean. So if you saw Prabhupada, you'd speak to him the same way that you'd speak to the new bhakta, the same way that you'd speak to your guru, because you don't really understand the difference. Yeah, but I saw that they were wearing saffron. I'm sure they must be a devotee. Or he said Haribol to me, so he must be a devotee. But those levels of devotion are very, very different. So there's something. There's the fundamentals, but somewhat not so much an understanding. Someone goes around a bit more, they understand, they've been given some service, they're a little bit more active, that devotee in the mode of passion. Running around a little bit more active. Okay. So there's more emphasis on the activity now. We're going to take over the world in about 3.5 days. Right? Of course, it will be 3.5 days because you have to stop for breakfast and lunch and dinner. Prashadam. Okay. Otherwise it would be 2, maybe 2.5. Okay. So there'll be more emphasis on the activity. Further, devotee comes to the mode of goodness. There's still emphasis on activity, but there's emphasis on understanding what is going on with that activity. And there's an emphasis on understanding what's going on within you when the activity is going on. Yeah? What's going on in the activity, what's going on in me. Because on the more subtle, refined sense, it's devotional service when it's ahetukiya pratiyataya yatma suprasidati. Right? In a more refined sense, it's devotional service when it's unmotivated, uninterrupted. Right? That is the standard that we're aspiring for. That's the prayojana. That's the goal. It's not a little something for Krishna, a little something for me. 2 things for Krishna, 2 things for me. Okay, 3 things for Krishna, 1 thing for me, because it's Gaurapanim. Okay? It's his birthday. Got to give him something a little extra. is slightly different at that time. So it goes up. So in the mode of goodness, you also consider, why do I do this? Why do I have this tendency? Why do I speak and deal with the devotees in the way that I speak and deal with the devotees? And it becomes extremely exciting for this reason. Just as there is an outer push to spread Krishna consciousness, there is also meant to be an inner push to taste Krishna consciousness. And the two things are intimately connected. Yeah? The two things are intimately connected. It is the excitement of the devotee to go as deep internally as they are going outwards to share. And you're giving what you actually have. If you are Krishna conscious, you can give Krishna. If you are Krishna conscious, Krishna sits alive in your heart. And wherever you go, people experience something. They may not even know what they experience. They may not even know why they experience. You may not be even conscious of what they experience, but that Krishna who's alive in your heart says, oh, this person is sincere, this person is serious, this person is devoted to me. Even at that point, you having some good feelings or favorable intention towards someone, you like this person, okay, I'm yours. And you're favorable to this person, so I will also give myself to them on the basis of your being favorable to them, because I'm yours. I know one devotee, when he first came to the movement, he didn't tell his family about his practice. Because they were from a Christian background, he knew they will have some issue. So he was speaking to his younger brother. And he didn't tell his younger brother either about him being a devotee. All he did is he said to his younger brother, he taught him about behavior. So you should behave this way and act like this and so on. And his younger brother said to him, he said, you know what? He said, even when you're not there with me physically, he said, for some reason, I always feel like you're always there with me internally, watching me, guiding me, and correcting my behavior. That's not, and his younger brother, as I said, is completely non-devotional, not practicing anything. But what that is this transference of the blessings and the presence of the Lord. So someone who has Krishna, if your very presence also affects the environment. You will sometimes see devotees who, when they're around the normal congregation of devotees, their behavior is terrible. It's terrible. They're mischievous, they tell lies, they're cheating, all this kind of stuff. But when Guru Maharaj is around, they suddenly act like a saint. And you're looking at them thinking, you're a hypocrite. You're not really like that. You're acting. And sometimes they are acting, to be fair. But there's also another phenomena that goes on. And the way you can tell this phenomena is that they act in a very saintly way, not only when they're around their spiritual master, but also when they are around other saintly devotees. Because the saintly devotees, they carry a certain potency in their consciousness. That potency spills over into the environment. So therefore, that consciousness and that energy dominates the lower modes. So when they come, everyone feels inspired. Oh, Maharaj, or oh, Prabhu. Because what's happening is you're getting the spillover of their own consciousness. And that's what's raising the environment and affecting everyone. It's like a magnet. It's drawing out the bhakti that normally lies more in a kind of dormant state within the heart of that particular individual. So they're not exactly faking it. It's actually that the strength of devotion is so powerful, it pulls everyone up to a higher standard. And to the extent that people are receptive, you actually incrementally go up and stay at that higher level. Even if you don't stay exactly at that high level, you don't go down as far as you were before. So every time it's incrementally going up. Jai Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki jai. Jai Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. Shri Shri Gaunitai Guru Parampara. Srila Prabhupada Tulsi Maharani ki jai. What time is class meant to complete? 9 o'clock. Okay, so I just wanted to check I didn't go on too late. So, This tendency and uplifting or removing the tendency also requires some introspection. And different people are offensive for different reasons. However, and we're going to bring this out, there is another side to this. Right? Or there are some subtle dimensions to this. And this is really important. The way that the scriptures work is that different statements are also meant for different individuals in different positions. Okay, and then there's two dimensions to this. One is that if I'm offensive to devotees, if I act and do something wrong, and someone says something, Prabhu, you shouldn't be offensive, or Prabhu, you shouldn't say this or act in this way, it is not now my prerogative, I can't say, oh, you can't tell me off, you're being offensive. Right? In other words, if I do something wrong and someone points it out, I can't say you're offending me by pointing out what I'm doing wrong. Okay? Because the onus is on me to change. Got it? If I do something wrong, I have to look at myself, and we cannot use the offense card as an excuse when people point out, no, that behavior is incorrect. Prabhupada explains this. In 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he says to call a thief is not an offense. Yeah? Otherwise, what happens is when devotees are tricky, they will, so-and-so's criticizing me because they said I did something. Yeah, because you did do something wrong. And that person's your authority, and they're pointing out to you that you've done something wrong. You understand? I remember there was an incident in our movement in one center. And there was a communication that this person is offensive, etc., etc. And the question that was brought up by one senior devotee, and it was a good question. He said, "But what has been done to this person that's causing them to act this way?" That devotional paradigm is very, very deep, and it requires a quality of responsibility that is beyond the norm. Yeah. It requires a quality of responsibility that is beyond the norm, because we actually exist within a culture. And that means we are our brothers and sisters' keeper. Prabhupada talks about the society of love and trust. And often, to be really honest, the way we speak about it is superficial. Because we speak about it in the sense of, yes, we have to have a culture of love and trust. But when Prabhupada speaks about it, there's a much more profound level to it. When he talks about the society of love and trust, what he means is that you must be loving and trustworthy. You understand? It is not that everyone should trust everyone while everyone's picking each other's pockets. Love and trust comes because the Vaishnavas deal affectionately and the Vaishnavas deal in a trustworthy way. That is how you create and generate that particular type of culture. So again, it requires each and every one of us to practice and display a certain quality or level of qualities. Okay. In the next verse, it talks about the Brahmana went to Srivas Thakur, took shelter of his lotus feet, and by Srivas Thakur's mercy, the Brahmana was freed. From all sinful reactions. So the mercy of the Vaishnavas is very powerful. If the Vaishnavas are pleased with you, what actually happens is that a blessing is conferred upon the individual that moves their life in ways that they can't imagine. Devotees love this topic of empowerment. Right? And to be honest, the devotees love the topic of empowerment because they love the idea of doing something ambitious in the world. Yeah? But that principle of empowerment is seen differently according to the mode of the individual. When devotees are in the mode of passion, they think about it in terms of doing something really, really big and ambitious. Prabhupada explains this point also in terms of how it has a different meaning. There's a statement in 8th canto, and it's explained that Bali Maharaj, he comes to fight the demigods, but he has come after serving his guru, Sukracharya. Yeah? And because of that blessing, when he comes, he's so powerful. Right? Because of the blessings that he's received in that sense. And that's why he can fight and he can be so strong in his ability. Now, actually, Prabhupada in the purport talks about how the blessings are primarily displayed in the sense of making spiritual advancement. You understand? So the empowerment, the superior display of empowerment is that the individual becomes very advanced in their Krishna consciousness. Right? The empowerment can also display itself in various services and initiatives. But the primary display that you've been really blessed, is that you can engage and experience a quality or level of Krishna consciousness that is very high. Yeah? That is the real sign that this individual is actually empowered. Yeah? Now, it can also manifest, as we said, externally. But many people, they think about it just in terms of the externals. The other thing is empowerment can be for different things. It's not that everyone is empowered for the same thing. No. Empowerment doesn't just mean that everything you do is going to be some great miracle and great success. No, it doesn't mean that. If you actually study the scriptures, you will see that's not what it means. Yeah? It can happen like that. In the case of Prabhupada, we see that, but it's not always in that particular way. The other third thing about empowerment is someone can be empowered to experience or achieve something at a given time also. So things will work according to Krishna's schedule. It's not, okay, I'm empowered now, everything I touch will turn to gold. Not necessarily. Because the main thing is actually that in all situations that we just render devotional service sincerely. Yeah? The most important thing. Now at the same time, and this is true also, at the same time, there is a need to render services and achieve things in the world in terms of spreading Krishna consciousness. And there's two reasons for that. One reason is to reclaim the fallen conditioned souls, to give as many people as possible the opportunity to engage in devotional service to the Lord and in that way perfect their life. But the other reason is internal. The other reason is that for the majority of us, being in the earlier stages of devotional life, our faith goes up when we see the movement being pushed on externally. When we see people in the external world accepting Krishna consciousness, then also we become enthusiastic to practice. Yes, that's my movement. Yes, I'm part of Lord Chaitanya's mission. Yeah? So out of compassion, both dimensions are taken care of. Yeah? So there's a whole series of things behind this point. Yeah? Okay. So, in verse 60, another Brahmana came to see the kirtan, but the door was closed and he could not enter the hall. I'll go on. 61, he returned home with an unhappy mind, but the next day he met Lord Chaitanya on the bank of the Ganges. Next verse, 62, that Brahmana was expert in talking harshly and cursing others. Thus he broke his sacred thread and declared, I shall now curse you for your behavior, has greatly aggrieved me. First of all, it's interesting that Brahmana was expert in talking harshly and cursing others. So the quality isn't very good. Brahmanas do tend to talk harshly though, to be honest. So there is one place in the Shastra, it says that the Kshatriyas, they speak sweetly. Right? But their hearts are like a razor. Okay? But the Brahmanas are the opposite. The Brahmanas, they're very soft-hearted, but my God, if they talk to you, it can be like just people just cutting you to shreds. So they're harsh in speech, but soft in heart. And it's considered that the Kshatriyas are the opposite. They're harsh in the heart, but their speech is soft. Of course, if they're Vaishnavas, it's different. Yeah? Because by the devotion, it changes things. Okay. So anyway, the Brahmana has given that statement. Next one, the Brahmana cursed the Lord, you should be bereft of all material happiness. When the Lord heard this, he felt great jubilation within himself. Now this is also instructive. You will not feel jubilation when you hear that you cannot have any more material enjoyment unless you're detached from material enjoyment. If there's nothing in it for you, if you don't want it. So, it's like someone saying to you that you will never be able to touch stool again. It's like, okay, I can live with that. It's alright. You know? You go on in your day, there's no emotional upset, there's no kind of, you don't need to take therapy, it's alright. Because what you've been told you can't have is something that you didn't want in the first place and you were detached from. But unless we're at that particular level, you won't respond that way. So the way that Lord Chaitanya has responded here is very, very instructive, and it speaks towards what we're striving for. In one sense, not exactly, because we're not trying to be just trying to reject the material. We're trying to embrace the spiritual. No? But in that endeavor to embrace the material, we first have to regulate, and ultimately we have to see that we're losing the taste for or the attachment to the material, because that's a sign that we're making spiritual progress. So, the Lord has felt great jubilation within himself. Now, as we look at this, there is a wider theme that we can consider. And that is that as devotees, we straddle two worlds. Okay? As devotees, we are constantly negotiating two different platforms of existence. The first platform is the lokic, the earthly, the material. Okay. The second platform that we're straddling is the purely transcendental, the ideal. And at different stages in our spiritual life, the balance of how we, or the degree of time that we spend in these two different worlds also changes. The balance also changes. So what do I mean by that? So for example, look at this pastime. So Srivas Thakur, he's been framed. So people have put Gopal Chapel has put all this paraphernalia to try and make out that he's done something wrong. Now, think about it. What would your response be if someone tried to frame you and make out that you did something wrong? Are you going to respond like Srivas Thakur? Let's start there, right? Are you going to say, actually, no, well, everyone, you're right. I'm not really a devotee. I'm a cheat. I've been doing all this materialistic stuff. Are you going to say that? Right? And let's go further on. The response when the community saw that, did they think, aha, Srivas Thakur, I always knew he was a bit suspicious. What was their response? They knew he was being humble. Now at the same time, let's take that further. If someone framed you and the community heard about it, would their response be, oh, you know what? I know that that's not true. They're really a saintly devotee. Or would they be like, I don't know, I heard something now. Oh, I'm not really sure. Yeah. So it's very interesting. There are many different layers in which we can understand the Shastra. The real system of education is actually this. The real system of education is a lot deeper than just the pastime or seeing the philosophical point on the surface. A devotee is meant to view the Shastra in a three-dimensional way. You're meant to see the sambandha. That means what is the situation that's going on, the sambandha. You're meant to see the activity. What's the action that's going on? And you're meant to see the prayojana. What's the goal of that action? Or what's the ideal goal or the ideal outcome that's meant to come from this situation? When you learn like this, your spiritual life becomes very dynamic for a number of reasons. When you learn like this, then you'll be able to derive from the Shastra the Dharma of every single situation. When you learn like this, then whenever you read the situation in the Shastra, you'll be able to take it from the situation in the Shastra, and you'll be able to take it to what it means for you in your present situation. Okay, and I'll explain how we do this. So in this context, you have Srivas Thakur. Let's say neophyte. What would you say? Srivas Thakur, neophyte, not doing badly, madhyam, or one of the eternal associates of Lord Chaitanya, pure devotee. Right, okay. So his level of consciousness, that's also part of the sambandha. The sambandha is a situation and the qualifications of the individuals involved in that situation. So, him being a pure devotee, if the entire community think, you know what, I knew he was a little bit iffy. I knew there was something when I look at Srivas, just something about him that just caused me to be a little bit suspicious. If if he was dealing with such a community and he actually said, yeah, I am a deviant, right? And the entire community turned against him, is it going to affect his ability to serve the Lord? No. In other words, is it going to affect his prayojana, his goal of love of Godhead? Yes or no? It's not going to affect him at all, right? So therefore, is it required for him to defend himself and say anything or do anything? No. Okay. When Prabhupada, as you go through Prabhupada's books, you'll sometimes hear this statement. When Prabhupada is speaking about pure devotees, he will talk about them, he'll talk about Haridas Thakur being whipped in 22 marketplaces, and then he says, we should not do what? We should not imitate. Right? That means, if they're doing that, and if it doesn't affect them achieving the goal, they don't have to say anything. But if you were in that situation and you don't say something, it's going to affect you getting to the goal. So you don't copy that particular person. You can copy with them when you're at that level of consciousness. Right? The goal remains fixed, in other words. The situations change. So what you're meant to consider is, in this situation, in this situation, if I'm trying to achieve this goal of love of Godhead, then what's the abhidheya that I need to do to stay focused on that goal? Someone else who's more qualified, they have options which we don't have. In other words, for a neophyte, their abhidheya becomes limited. I'm a neophyte, so I want to preach, but you shouldn't be preaching in situations where you're going to get tempted to fall into Maya. Right? So your range of options as to where you can preach is about this big. Right? But when Srila Prabhupada comes, he's a pure devotee who's untouched by the material energy. So his range of options as to where he can preach is about this big. Right? In other words, there's more situations that he can go into without any danger of him falling down. Actually, he can go into any situation. It is just like the difference between a neophyte swimmer and an expert swimmer. Right? Someone's drowning. Right? They're drowning. And you can swim and you want to help them. Right? But when they're drowning in the kind of shallow area and your swimming ability is very basic, okay, you can rescue those people. But the people who are drowning and there's rapids, you're not so strong as to be able to swim but I saw someone, I watched the TV program and some guy dived in and saved people who were in a really deep and murky area of the water. Yeah, but he was more qualified than you. So when you read about him swimming into that area and saving people, it's fine, but it's according to Adhikar. Right? So he can achieve the same goal, but in more strenuous circumstances. In other words, his sambandha is expanded. Right? He can still achieve the same thing in a far greater range of circumstances. You understand the difference? So the sambandha, the range of sambandha and abhidheya, the range of sambandha and abhidheya is different for every devotee according to their adhikar. So when you see this, you can identify what's the goal, what is his life about. Srivas Thakur is trying to serve Krishna with pure devotion. Okay? What's his situation? His situation is this. Right? And then based upon his situation and based upon his goal, he can therefore do A, B, and C abhidheya. He can engage in any. He could have equally said to them, look, to be honest, you shouldn't go around trying to put paraphernalia, do Durga worship. I'm not upset, but it's not good for you. Because if you do this, you're going to actually you're going to get some reaction because it's offensive. He could have done that. That's also acceptable. Yeah? He could do a range of things. So you have to see this. What's the context? What's the goal? And based upon these things, what is the proper activity that I'm meant to be doing? Yeah. So just to take it further, if you look at the sambandha as the context, sometimes you're going to have to say something because the people that you're around, they're not refined enough to understand. No, this person wouldn't do that. This is a lie. Yeah? And you're not advanced enough that if everyone thought you had kind of lied or whatever, you're not advanced enough that this would not disturb you and you could keep going towards a goal. In many cases, the devotees would settle in at a certain area. They'd think, okay, if people don't like me, why should I practice Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada said that devotees are meant to be loving, but no one's loving, I'm going to leave. That's what would go on. Now there's a further point. with all of that said, Krishna knows what we need, we know what we want. And actually, however much you evaluate or you think you know what your limitations are, Krishna knows better. That means he is sometimes going to give us situations and circumstances that we don't like, we don't even think we deserve. But it's like, no, it's good for you, it's your karma, and you can handle it if you take advantage or take shelter of the process in the way that you can. So there's the third factor, and that is where Krishna is going to increase the capacity of the devotee by sometimes putting them in circumstances that they don't want to be in. But actually, Krishna knows, you can handle this. You may not like it, you may think it's harsh, you may not think it's fair, but you can take this, and there's a superior purpose behind it. This is going to purify you, and this situation, even if it's externally not to your liking, it's going to bring something fantastically auspicious to your Krishna consciousness. So it's incredibly exciting. Don't deny the challenges in spiritual life. The most important thing to remember about each and every single challenge that you experience in spiritual life is that the person who's allowing it to happen to you has unlimited affection for you. If you can just remember this one point, that the person who's allowing the situations that you're experiencing, he has unlimited affection for you. A love for you the likes of which you can't conceive. So if he's allowing it to happen, dude, there's something auspicious on the other side of this situation. There's something auspicious while you're going through it, and there's definitely something auspicious on the other side. Keep going. Not just keep going, but deal with it in a Vaishnava way. Now this takes it a little further. Vaishnava way, again, will be different according to the individuals. There's a range of responses which are given by Guru Sadhu Shastra. That's why when you look upon the Shastra, you can see them as codes. So when you read pastimes, you can see, okay, a devotee was in this situation. How did he respond? Right? Or even our founder Acharya, he was in this situation. How did he respond? And you will find it's not one response only. When you look at that, when you study the scripture broadly, you'll see that when the devotees were in this were dealing with this controversy or this challenge. As I read, Haridas Thakur responded this way. Srivas Thakur, he responded this way. Prabhupada, when he was being in a situation, when he was being, let's say, criticized by his godbrothers, Prabhupada responded this way. Right? You read CC, interestingly enough, Prabhupada, some of his godbrothers were critical of him. What does Prabhupada say about them in CC? What does he do? What does he do? What kind of things does Prabhupada say in relation to his godbrothers who sometimes, not all of them, but some of them who had some negative things to say about Prabhupada? What was his response in CC? And this is in purports. What does he say? Interesting. And that's a strong statement also, So you could say, well, but Srivas Thakur, when he was being framed, or when people tried to do something envious towards him, he didn't protest. He put his hands up and he said that, I actually am an offender. Prabhupada didn't necessarily do that. Interestingly enough. Because there's a variety of responses, and his response is also taking into account the element that he's the founder Acharya, he has disciples, he's establishing a movement, so he has to respond in such a way that protects the people that he's commissioned to protect. So he takes into account an additional element in terms of his response. Yeah? So that the more that devotees become refined in their understanding, you will see Shastra not just as some interesting philosophical facts, but you will see the Shastra as codes, a range of variety of ways to respond to given situations, but to respond in such a way that remains Vaishnava, but is also pragmatic for your level of consciousness and the service that you have to render in this world. And this is what I meant when we said that we as Vaishnavas, we straddle two worlds. We straddle the world of the ideal, and we straddle the earthly plane, taking into account our present level of advancement, our present emotions, our present feelings as well. Yeah? And if you get this balance right, you make progress continuously. If you become sentimental, you come into problems. That's why we all need guidance. What does guidance do? Guidance takes the ultimate teachings of the Shastra and applies it to your present sambandha, your present context. Okay, for you at your present level of consciousness, better to do this. Right? That is the point. It's still within Shastra, but it's Shastra as it's personalized for you in this time, this place, this circumstance, this level of advancement. Okay, let's move on. So, he's cursed Lord Chaitanya has felt jubilation. Then we have our verse. Any faithful person who hears that this Brahman is cursing Lord Chaitanya is delivered from all Brahminical curses. Now, this is a very interesting point. So, the Brahmanas have a certain Shakti. They get a certain tejas, and that certain tejas comes from the tendency to be austere. Right? By engaging in austerities, it gives a certain power. And the nature of a Brahmana is such that they are more inclined to perform austerities than other Varnas. Okay? Other Varnas do sometimes perform austerities. Right? And no matter what Varna, devotees have that ability to perform austerities. But from the material point of view, when you're not taking into account the devotion, the Brahmanas are more inclined to be austere. Yeah? So by their austerity, a certain Shakti develops. But at the same time, there's a warning. When one performs austerities, if it's not done carefully, in a balanced way, not only does the Shakti develop, but one can become more hard-hearted. Yeah? That's why the Brahmanas, shastrically, the specific statement towards the Brahmanas is that the Brahmanas must be forgiving. Right? You must be forgiving. Because what happens is otherwise you've got someone who's got basically like dynamite in their hand, and if they're easily angered, bang, everything will explode. Right? It can turn the person's world upside down. So the Kshatriyas, they are allowed to engage their anger in service. Right? You see Pariksit Maharaj, Kali comes, he just threatens to kill Kali, etc. The Kshatriyas are allowed to engage their anger in service. The Brahmanas don't. Because if you get angry with someone, it causes a lot of trouble. Of course, they can feign anger, that's another thing. That's a whole other topic. But they have to always be forgiving. Yeah? Because otherwise it will cause severe trouble to them, and it will cause trouble to the people who they're actually around. And therefore, one aspect of the Brahmana's anger is a tendency to curse. But devotional service is so powerful, it goes completely beyond the Varna platform. Pure devotional service is so powerful, it completely turns everything and moves everything to another level. Therefore, it supersedes all material situations, all material curses and material circumstances. And here, particularly, you see the power of the Shastra in terms of the phal. You'll see this again and again in the Shastra. If one who hears this pastime gets this particular benefit. Excuse me. So here, for example, any faithful person who hears of this Brahman is cursing Lord Chaitanya is delivered from all Brahminical curses. However, there's always a fine print to these things. So in the purport, Prabhupada speaks about the fine print. When you read this, it's very instructive. Look at what Prabhupada says in the purport. When one understands this fact with faith and love, he personally becomes free from all curses uttered by Brahmanas or anyone else. They understand this fact with faith and with love. Isn't that interesting? It reminds me of Nectar of Instruction, right? One who takes who takes a bath in where? Where do you take a bath that's explained in Nectar of Instruction, and one immediately attains love of God? Prema. Radhakund, right? How many people in the room have been to Radhakund? Raise your hands. Okay. How many people have done some kind of bathing, whether it's snan or dipped in fully? Raise your hands. Okay. Now, how many of you are experiencing full-blown prema at this present given moment in time? Okay, but that's the verse, isn't it? That's the verse. That's Upadeshamrita. That's nectar of instruction. That's the verse. That's exactly what it says. I've read it word for word. So what's going on here? It's stated, you've done it, you didn't go somewhere else, it was Radhakund. The qualification also relates to consciousness. It also relates to the consciousness. So these are some of the subtleties in this. So yes, the Shastra is very, very real. But we access it also by our faith, by our love, by our devotion ultimately. There are always deeper dimensions to this because this is coming from the people who are the most profound. Yeah? Even to the point, and we won't get into this today, but there are things in the scripture which are deliberately hidden. There's a strategy that the acharyas use that they will sometimes talk about something and they will break up an understanding of a given subject and they will scatter it through the Shastra. Not only will they scatter it through the Shastra, they will also speak about it indirectly, just to force everyone that if you want to understand this, you're going to work for it. Right? That means you're going to read, you're going to study, you're going to research, you're going to contemplate, and only by doing that will you be able to gain access. Jai Shri Radha Kulananda Ki Jai, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman, Shri Gonitai, Guru Parampara Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. You're going to work for it. And they're such geniuses. How do they make you work for it? It's very interesting. You can trace it, you can kind of, it's like an equation that you can trace backwards. That if you do that, if you have some level of, if there's some profound understanding and you make people work for it, you scatter it throughout the Shastra and you speak about it directly and indirectly, the only people who are going to be able to find it are people who are determined and who are prepared to interface with the Shastra consistently. Right? That means to be determined like that, consistently determined, to interface with the Shastra again and again and again. Those are symptomatic of devotees in which mode? Goodness. So what they've done is they've worked backwards. Okay, we only want people in goodness that means devotees who are at a certain level of depth to find it. So if we want people who have a certain level of depth to find it, we have to hide it in such a way that only they will have the qualification to get there. Right? Amazing. So working backwards, someone who's in goodness, they can look, wow, I can see all of these things here. Right? They'll work, they'll try and tie different things together, they'll put it all together and say, I get it. I get it now. But unless the person's in goodness, there's no question, because in passion, one will be so restless. The ability to sit down and actually read and read and read and research and look and study and then to bring all these different things together, it just won't happen. Right? So it's very, very powerful. You trace it backwards. We only want these people to find it. Therefore, we hide it in such a way that only they will have the qualification to get to what we want to say. Amazing. Anyway. We have 10 minutes, so we'll stop there. Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Janitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Let's see what questions that you have. And of course, I do reserve the right in the association of devotees to throw the questions out to those who have been practicing longer than me and who know better than me to answer. My disclaimer now, okay. Oh, before we go to questions, I should also say a few words. So today, I asked permission. So today is the appearance day, the Vyas Puja appearance day of His Holiness Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So I also thought that in this point that we will just mention one or two things, because I know that he wrote a book on this topic of offences, Radha Shunyas, Reflections on Sacred Teachings, and you're speaking about Vaishnava Aparad, the dangers of Vaishnava Aparad. But what I also found really useful and instructive was how we relate in such a way that we don't put ourselves in this situation. Yeah? See, beneath all of this discussion is actually a question. What do you do when you're upset at the behavior of someone else who's a Vaishnava? Yeah? How do you process that? How do you deal with that? How do you respond to that? Yeah? Because as devotees, mistakes will be made. Yeah? So therefore the question is, recognizing that mistakes will be made, we have to actually have a culture. And when I say culture, I don't just mean an external culture. I'm speaking now primarily an internal culture, which is going to allow me to process these things in a healthy way. Now, the first and fundamental step is that we need to be practicing Krishna consciousness deeply. What happens when you practice Krishna consciousness deeply is it actually makes you more resilient, believe it or not. If you chant sincerely, I mean, you all know, who's been in a kirtan where they actually felt really blissful? Be honest. Yeah, it's a universal experience. If you chant properly, it gives you a certain bliss, a certain happiness. Now, when you feel a certain satisfaction and happiness, the first defense comes by that. Because it's easier to overlook the behavior of other people or the negativity of other people because you feel a certain satisfaction within yourself. So you can expand that principle. Proper chanting, proper deep reading, right? So again, not this superficial thing. The superficial thing, it's not superficial exactly because it's still useful, but there's more and more we can derive from the Shastra. It's not just a collection of interesting facts, and let me show off how much I know by quoting a verse in Sanskrit or Bengali when I give class. We should know how to live this. Yeah? And when we look at it, when we look at these pastimes and we hear about these pastimes, we should reflect upon our own level. Am I at the level that when people criticize me, I'm not affected? Am I at the level that if someone cursed me and said, you're not going to have any material enjoyment, I'll be like, cool, no problem. Or when I reflect on this for myself, do I see, no, I'm really still heavily attached to material enjoyment? When I reflect upon this, do I see myself, I'm still heavily attached to what people think about me, good or bad? Because when you have that, what will happen is you will lack integrity. We will lack integrity. If we're too affected by what people think, then even when you know something is wrong, you will not be able to say anything for fear of what people are going to say about you. Yeah? The opposite is also true. When we have that type of integrity, our spiritual life will fly, because it is a form of you claiming tremendous power. Love also implies that. Love also implies having a certain integrity. And when you have a collection of individuals who each individually have integrity, then you have an extraordinary community of devotionally empowered individuals. Think about that. Where there is so much love, care and shelter that the speed of advancement exponentially goes up for each and every individual. See, there is another side to this offense thing. When people are insecure, they tend to become offensive. Someone who's very secure within themselves, they don't overreact to a situation because they feel secure. I know I haven't done anything wrong. If people don't like it, I can live with that. Then the words of the Shastra become even more true. Then it becomes, yeah, it's my karma. But you say that not because it's an ISKCON soundbite. Not because it's a cliche that you heard in class, but because you are actually internally steady. But when we don't have that, you tend to overreact. Then you get the kind of counteracting politics and intrigue, all of these things, because the person internally isn't steady. Therefore, they become too easily disturbed by being honored and dishonored, and which is, interestingly enough, is exactly the thing that Krishna tells Arjuna that you should have to be careful of. One who is equipoised in honor and dishonor. Of course, the other side is also that you do address things if it's your job to address things. So, Bhadadita Maharaj in the commentary on the Reflections on Sacred Teachings book about Radha Sunya, he talks about this. This is why we want to implore all of us as devotees, please, please, please apply the philosophy. Prabhupada didn't write these books for philosophical discussion alone. He wrote these books so that we would live the books. You see, you can be so deep and and blessed by spiritual wisdom by thinking, how do I interact with the devotees? How do I practice my spiritual life so that even if someone does something negative to me, I'm not affected? Think about that. Now, there's certain implications. It means associating with the right devotees in the right way. Are you associating with the right devotees in the right way? It means practicing our Krishna consciousness deeply. Ideally, are you chanting your rounds in the morning? Do you practice devotional service in the mode of goodness? Do you continually take guidance? When you have your so quote-unquote realization, do you check in with the Vaishnavas? This is my understanding of the scripture. I know that you're learned in this area. Is that correct? Or do I have the wrong understanding here? And when people say, no, I think it's wrong, do we engage in a real dialogue? A dialogue with integrity. That means, well, I think I did get it right. If you think it's wrong, let's have a discussion. Give me the reasons why you think this is a wrong understanding, and I will give you the reason why I think this is a right understanding. And then give me the shastric statements, the evidence that you've taken from Guru Sadhu Shastra to support your conclusion. And I will give you the evidence according to Guru Sadhu Shastra that I've taken that helped me to come to my conclusion. And then we can see, based upon proper evidence, devotional evidence, what is correct. So it's not blind acceptance, it's not blind rejection either. I truly think this is correct. If you think this is wrong, let's look at why. So we can have these deep exchanges as devotees. And therefore, then you will really fly in spiritual life. My humble estimate is that within our movement, because of a rather superficial application of Krishna consciousness, and in many cases a misapplication of Krishna consciousness, the devotees are not thriving, flying and experiencing devotional service at a pace that we should. And in many cases, in the majority of cases, it is not even a requirement to engage in more effort. It is simply a superior and more informed application of what we're doing at the present moment. Okay. Now, questions.